You don't get it, do you? A phenomenon has appeared on the internet. For a year now, more and more content creators, typically on platforms like YouTube and Twitch, have been popping up all over the world using anime models that have been rigged to be animated in real time with motion capture. Typically, people use this as a visual accompaniment while they stream other content online. This is a virtual YouTuber, or VTuber for short, and they have steadily risen to becoming some of the most popular content creators on the internet in the course of just a year. But what if I were to tell you that they could be manipulating you? That the community has a shady aspect to it that, if left unchecked, could see the fans of this form of content be emotionally manipulated and taken advantage of for the profits and benefits of the creators and companies who manufacture this content. Because we are currently seeing it develop. But before we focus on that, we need to first cover the history behind both Japanese animation and idol culture in order to understand how we've gotten here and what we can take from those industries and determine where the VTuber trend is heading. Japan. It's perhaps one of the most interesting countries on this planet. It's one of the oldest nations on Earth to this day and has had a history unlike any other. While certain aspects of Japan appear similar to other countries, Japan always has an aspect to its culture that makes it distinct among other nations. Following Japan's crushing defeat in World War II, the allied nations of the war occupied the country. Japan was left in a state of horrific disrepair after the war, with its population having lost millions of lives, and having 2 of its cities wiped off the face of the planet. During the occupation, Japan underwent many societal, economic, and governmental changes, virtually all in the interest of making the country more like the United States. What blossomed from this was nothing short of a miracle. The economic miracle in Japan was the point where Japan went from being just another country you probably can't name, to being the economic juggernaut it is today. Japan's economy rapidly grew from the mid-50s up until the 1990s. Japan's economy facilitated the means for its population to innovate and revolutionize technology themselves, and would start some of the biggest companies in the consumer electronics industry, and from this period, the Japanese industries of idols and animation flourished. Anime is simply the Japanese term to refer to animation, but has since morphed to specifically refer to Japanese animation. While Japanese animation had existed since nearly the start of the 1900s, due to a lack of resources or experts in the medium, Japanese artists faced difficulty creating the art. This was only further worsened with the success of Disney cartoons. The Walt Disney Studio was able to create high-quality cartoons at a relatively quick pace, and Disney cartoons cemented their foothold on the medium in Japan. Consumers wanted Disney, so it was hard for anyone to try and compete with such a large company, given the circumstances. However, this wouldn't last long, as the studio Toei Animation was founded, with them producing the first color anime feature film, The Tale of the White Serpent, an adaptation of a Chinese folktale. With the film's success, it proved that animation by Japanese people for a Japanese audience could be successful. It was the true start to anime as it exists today. Despite both being animation, what primarily separates anime from Western animation and what makes it so well liked by its fans hinges on the experimentation done in the medium's formative years. In the 60s, creators and TV stations experimented with different styles of anime. Many know of shonen, which is anime aimed towards young boys, but during this era we also saw the start of shoujo, or girls anime, and even more adult-oriented animation. Since many of these anime were adapted from previously existing manga, it allowed studios to adapt and experiment with manga that have already proven to be successful on their own, and helps with marketing since people are already familiar with the concept. With these early steps, it allowed anime to cement itself as a medium that can offer entertainment for different kinds of audiences. Contrast this with the West, where Disney's immense success caused other studios to try and compete with that same style of animation, creating an industry to almost exclusively create films for families and children. By the time adult animation would be experimented with, the industry had already taken shape, and adult animation was counterculture instead of being part of the medium. Something of a similar effect would also go on to be seen with video gaming, as developers scrambled to make the next Mario or Sonic. At the same time as anime's rise in Japan, another industry was beginning to take form. In 1963, the French film Cherchez l'Idole was released in Japanese theaters. Audiences were enthralled with the appearance of the actress Sylvie Vartan, Her youthful appearance and cute demeanor appeal to the tastes of many Japanese people, particularly their affection for anything and everything cute. It's a mindset that has been ingrained in its culture for a while now. Living in Japan is a pretty rugged experience, so for many people, men, women, and children alike, they find solace in cute imagery. This can be seen everywhere in the country, from their overabundance of cute mascots, their beauty standards, and even their technology. Sylvie Vartan's appearance had such a colossal impact on Japan that it's often cited as the origin of the idol industry, as the entertainment industry created the label idol to describe some possessing the traits most people adored Vartan for. Beginning in the 1970s, idol auditions would be held by businesses in order to handpick the cutest and most talented young women and men to become some of the first Japanese idols. Thanks to many Japanese households owning at least one television, this meant audiences had easy, instant access to seeing idols. This led to the 80s being known as the golden age of Japanese idols, thanks to the commercial interest in the culture picking up momentum. Programming featuring idols enjoyed a high viewership, and idols were able to land deals with marketing agencies to have them featured in advertisements, promoting both a product and the idols themselves. Among one of the most important and influential idol groups of the decade was Onyako Club. Their different approach to idols would go on to change the direction of the industry. Rather than their group being comprised of professional singers and dancers, it instead consisted mostly of high school girls, who would gain experience over the course of their careers. Onyanko Club was also the first idol group to introduce the concept of the graduation, which is the retirement of older idols while a new idol would take their place. After the golden age, the Japanese idol industry waned in popularity in the 90s, particularly due to Japan's economic collapse. And that brings us to the current era. To really understand the current state of anime and idol industries, it's important for us to understand the state that Japan is in currently. Japan is currently suffering from a widespread loneliness crisis. Japan has a culture that thrives on the concept of pride and honor, and while that was previously shown in things such as the Bushido Code and whatnot, it still lives on through one's performance in the workforce. Japan's business culture is a complicated, confusing, strict social structure that foreigners can only hope to understand, with a long list of draconian rules and guidelines, and failure to follow these rules can result in you losing your job. On top of this, working conditions aren't fantastic either. Lots of Japanese workers spend long hours in the office to get their work done, often by doing unpaid overtime. The Japanese simply don't have enough time to develop relationships with others, or, in even worse circumstances, they're unable to. The hikikomori is a complicated issue Japan also faces, combined with the loneliness of their workforce. I'm sure many are familiar with the term by now, but for those unaware, hikikomori are hermits, shut-ins, or recluse who stay in their homes or bedroom for long stretches of time, sometimes even exceeding a decade. An estimated 500,000 people in Japan are hikikomori. The problem with hikikomori is that while there are many factors that can make someone a hikikomori, the solution has no definitive answer. Hikikomori can be made through any number or combination of factors, but the common denominator between most is that Japan's social or economic structures have failed them in some way, whether it can be from severe bullying in schools, failure to conform to the standards expected by Japanese society, insulting or belittlement by others, a poor upbringing, or simply an inability to find work at all. It's been suspected by many ignorant people that hikikomori exists simply because they're all lazy man-children who just want to stay home, watch anime, and play video games instead of getting a real job. But this is a gross misrepresentation and misinterpretation of the hikikomori that gets brought up all too often. In fact, most, if not all, hikikomori suffer from some form of mental disorder, but Japan, much like the rest of the world, has no idea how to handle the topic of mental health. The Japanese, as a whole, are unhappy. One of the unhappiest nations on Earth, in fact. Japan's expectation for the average citizen can often be a burden so insurmountable that eventually the citizen cracks under the pressure. And it's not like getting a job is much better either, but whether they are employed or not, the population is lonely. So, how do they try and alleviate this loneliness? Nowadays, while the Japanese idol industry isn't in its golden years, it seems to be at the height of its popularity. It feels like that anyways. The idol industry has bubbled and morphed into a new form in order to capitalize on the loneliness that many Japanese people have. In 2019, Nikon Sports estimated that there are 3,000 idol groups in Japan alone, and approximating that if each group had at least 10 members, that would total to 30,000 idols. Now, you probably look at that and you kind of shrug it off because, yeah, that's not that much, but that's because sites like YouTube have corroded your perspective on what a lot is. Face it, if you see a video with 30,000 views, you don't perceive it as particularly popular due to relativity. But if you recontextualize it to something like $30,000, then you start to understand the scope that we're talking about. And you should, because that emphasizes and adds gravity to every horrible aspect this industry is hiding. If you search the term Japanese idol in Western countries, you're immediately met with articles and videos discussing the dark aspects of the industry. And for good reason, as the sins of the industry are numerous and I probably won't be able to count all of them in this video. But to mention a few, idols are being forced to memorize and perfect dance moves late into the night without proper rest, idols collapsing during rehearsals due to hyperventilation, idols training from early in the morning until late at night without pay simply because they are a trainee, threats of violence, sexualization, stalking, control over relationships, power harassment, bullying, being assaulted by fans in an attack that may or may not have been orchestrated by one of your rivals, Jesus Christ, and tragically, suicidal thoughts. Honoka Omoto took her own life after suffering from workplace abuse from higher-ups, after Omoto toyed with the idea of leaving the idol group. She was only 16 years old at the time. Cases of idols experiencing overworking, verbal abuse, and sexual harassment are widespread in the industry. Kunitaka Kasai, a lawyer invested in protecting the rights of entertainers, stated in an article that, quote, "A number of talent agencies have also increased, but many of them are run by individuals lacking know-how and experience," end quote, with many flourishing in the business. Even more disturbing is the large market for gravure idols, which are basically idols who model for photo shoots, often featuring them in swimsuits and/or in suggestive poses and situations. Even more upsetting, even junior idols are featured in this content, who are idols 15 and under. While Japan revised laws in 2004 and 2014 to outlaw much of this content, this implies all types of things about the content that had existed beforehand. And despite these laws, content featuring junior idols in bathing suits, maid outfits, and gym clothes are still legal. And that's all without even covering the other half of the industry, the fans. The idol industry cannot exist without its iron grip on its fans. Most people know of the ban placed on idols to not have significant others. However, this problem extends farther as the personal lives of idols are controlled by their managers in order to maintain a certain image. Idols have to maintain a very delicate persona because if something happens that conflicts with the image crafted by managers and contracting offices, the magic and illusion shatters, and part of what draws fans to idols is ruined. This is so important to the industry because companies use the emotional connection fans have for idols in order to basically emotionally manipulate them for profit. The idol industry relies on the parasocial relationship fans have with idols in order to maximize profits. Totally aware that this is bred from the loneliness issue in Japan, many Japanese people find it difficult to form relationships with others given how overworked they are. So many use idols as an outlet to help them with these needs. Many liken their relationship to idols to the same they may have with a sibling, son or daughter, or even a romantic partner. And this can be seen perfectly in the biggest fish of them all, AKB48. As one of the biggest and most popular groups, they represent much of what's wrong with the industry in the eyes of critics. AKB48 can be credited in closing the gap between idol and fan, which isn't always a good thing. In closing this gap, it's allowed fans to blur their distinction between reality and fantasy, as any of their idols are easy to meet. They popularized handshake events, where fans can pay to shake the hands of their favorite idol, something that most people offer for free upon meeting to be courteous. Ironically, this has led to a number of incidents where fans use this opportunity to assault an idol. The commercialism of AKB48 is also a bit of an issue. The faces of these idols have been plastered on all types of merchandise that you can freely purchase yourself. These girls have been featured in manga and anime. They have quite a number of video games based on them, one of which is a dating sim where you, the player, can date any of your favorite group members. But by far the most appalling piece of merch is that there's an officially licensed Sony PSP Special Edition that features 48 battery cover plates that feature each member's signature and an imprint of their lips. This is real. They sold this. People own this. People paid money for this. And seeing as how one of their games is a rhythm game, that means I'm gonna have to talk about them eventually on my review show, so boy do I have something to look forward to. In fact, when the Disney film Wreck-It Ralph was brought to Japan, they had AKB48 create a new song for the film, which was featured exclusively in the Japanese release. I find it ironic that anime fans like to cry and joke so much about 4Kids and such, but nobody ever talks about this. This would be like if the newest Studio Ghibli film was released in theaters, and for no reason at all, they added Travis Scott's Sicko Mode into the film. Anime fans would be outraged. And don't be mistaken, not everyone in Japan is happy about the idol culture either. Many people in Japan see through the fake illusion that companies are trying to sell to them, but the fans often pay enough on merchandise to make up for it. And that's all without even beginning to touch on the sins of the anime industry. Similarly to the idol industry, the workers putting all their work into anime get paid low wages, while the businessmen managing the company rake in all the profit through television ratings and merchandising. Despite being more popular than Western animation, at least with adults, anime still suffers from lower budgets than their Western counterparts. This is why characters in speaking scenes often have limited movements compared to Western animation. So when it comes to animation, studios rely on merchandise in order to turn a profit. In the West, this typically comes in the form of things such as apparel, toys, books, licensed mobile games, and other such merchandise. But Japan has a shadier means to the same end. Anime in recent decades has progressively used more moe and anime tropes in order to cast the widest net possible, and have as much appeal to anime fans as possible. Media has always had the ability to captivate us and make us grow attached to characters. But with anime in recent years, they've overdone it to a point where characters exist solely for people to grow attached to for superficial reasons, which has made the entire industry feel more and more homogenized and stale. Now characters are just tropes with different designs and backstories rather than being compelling characters used to tell a narrative. This is so that when you become a fan of these characters or anime, you will be compelled to buy merchandise featuring these characters. This is why the more shameful and sexual aspects of anime exist, so that you can buy figures, plushies, dakimakura, pads, and other merch featuring your favorite characters. And this problem even extends into video games as well, as seen with the series like Senran Kagura and Hyperdimension Neptunia. This has also created a rise in a whole new genre of video games, dating simulators. Now, I think I should make it abundantly clear that in no way am I making fun of anyone or demeaning anyone who plays dating sims. It's perfectly fine to play one casually, as you do with any other game. But we can all agree that there's a point where things have been taken too far. Dating sims are, again, designed in a way where players can use it as a substitute for true human connection. Most games have the main character be a representation of the player, essentially making them the main character, who's able to date any of the men and women that are featured in the game. For some, this creates an unhealthy synthetic relationship between the player and the characters within the game. When you're unable to engage in a romantic relationship yourself, it makes whatever next best thing so much more important to you. A love hotel are hotels that cater to romantic couples by offering them some private time to be alone and enjoy each other's company. It's something much more prevalent in Japan, of course. However, the city of Atami, what was once a popular wedding and honeymoon spot in Japan, has been failing to find business as of late. In order to adapt, the city has remodeled their businesses to offer the same service to people and their dating sim partners. 13 locations within the city now have codes that players of the game Love Plus can scan in order to have their girl of choice appear in an augmented reality form beside the player as if they were real. Hotels now offer rooms for two, you and your virtual girlfriend. Restaurants offer meals for two, you and your virtual girlfriend. A whole business was created to capitalize on people finding solace and comfort in something that isn't real, will never be real, and can never reciprocate the same feelings they have for these fictional characters. I guess what really drives me insane about both idol and anime industries is that despite the glaring flaws and manipulative practices companies use in order to nickel and dime their own fans, nobody seems compelled to speak out besides a solitary, "Oh, that's bad," or "Yeah, that sucks." Despite the Persona series' often insightful deconstructions of society and poignant social commentary, they opted to undo the entire character arc for the character Rise Kujikawa, a former idol trying to adjust to becoming a normal citizen, in order to have her become an idol once again for no reason in the spin-off game Persona 4 Dancing All Night. Agretsuko, an anime known for its commentary on issues prevalent in Japanese workplaces, chose to dedicate an entire season to having Retsuko account for an underground idol group and becoming an idol herself, devoid of any clever commentary on the numerous issues with the industry, aside from a weak plot point referencing stalking and harassment. Many anime have been made, almost glamorizing the idol industry and trying to portray it as some sort of dream job, despite how dark the industry truly is. One of the biggest games currently is Genshin Impact, a Chinese gacha adventure game that's available on something you probably already own. Yet despite the game's use of moe characters in order to have people invested in the gacha aspect, no one seems all too concerned over that aspect. I just find it really fucking ironic that, and I say this unironically, so-called free thinkers won't buy a game on the Epic Games Store because of Epic Games being owned by Tencent, yet are more than okay with letting Genshin Impact be installed on their drive, a game with kernel-level anti-cheat, meaning it operates at the same level as your operating system's most basic and important functions, and is active from the moment you boot your system. The game is always surveilling whatever device you have it installed on. As such, if the game suffers from a cyber attack, your entire operating system could be compromised and could brick your system. But who cares about that, guys? I just pulled Rosaria. With our lives becoming more and more isolated due to the advancements in technology, I'm personally fearful that more and more people will be using things such as anime and celebrities to try and fill the void in their hearts. But I know that it won't. It feels good to bask in these virtual and fictitious worlds, but they actively manipulate the people into caring for something that isn't real and doesn't care for them, only to line the pockets of the businessmen that designed it that way. Case in point. Finally, after that exhaustive history lesson, we've reached the main subject of today's video. But it's important that we addressed and acknowledged the history of both idols and anime because VTubers are both of those things, and it really puts in perspective a lot of the issues we discuss moving forward. It's easy to shrug off some of these things I discuss later without proper knowledge of why it's designed that way and what parallels we can reference. After all, you can't begin to talk about the history of the United States without addressing Great Britain and how big of a country it was. Hatsune Miku is the precursor of the virtual YouTuber and virtual idol trend. To make an analogy that will probably make the most sense, Miku is to VTubers what the Nintendo Wii U was to the Nintendo Switch. Conceptually, they're quite different, but they share so much DNA that you can understand what aspects the successor inherited and expanded upon. Hatsune Miku's story starts with a software known as Vocaloid. The name of the software is so synonymous with Miku at this point that I don't think most people realize that it isn't a name for her group of friends. Vocaloid is a software created by the company Yamaha, well known for making musical instruments. The Vocaloid software was a singing voice synthesizer created to basically allow people to synthetically create the sound of someone singing. It's similar to MIDI instruments, which are synthetic programs that roughly recreate what the sound of that instrument is supposed to sound like. Yamaha created different voice packs for that software that featured different voices that you could use in a program. Miku was one of those voices, part of Vocaloid 2. Each voice pack would feature a different character on their packaging to visually represent what kind of voice it is. And while English voice packs featured things such as a photo of a human or a classical Western drawing of a human, the Japanese voice packs were handled entirely differently. The company Krypton Future Media handled the commercial aspects of the Japanese voices, including their packaging and general branding. Krypton went with an unapologetically moe style with its packaging, with each Vocaloid being represented by a cute anime girl, and that's how Miku came to be. She exploded in popularity after her release and has become a media juggernaut and pop culture icon. And, of course, has become an idol herself, being used in all types of advertising, cross-promotions, licensed video games, and has packed stadiums with her concerts. It's clear that a lot of people have affection for Miku, to the point where someone even fucking married her. Akihiko Kondo is the man legally married to Hatsune Miku, and he had a full wedding and everything. And he isn't alone, another man married his love plus girlfriend as well, the game I mentioned before. Miku was a way for creators to effectively create both a mascot with wide appeal, while also creating an entire Japanese idol, while circumventing all the annoying things like fair pay, royalties, mental and physical health, and all those pesky shenanigans you have to worry about with real human beings. Beyond that though, it proved that there was a market for an idol that didn't have to be human to be successful. And Miku found a success outside of the typical fan base for idols, but also among general consumers as well, which is why she has remained relevant for so long, and why people associate her with nostalgia for older internet culture. This then sets up the start for VTubers. The first true VTuber came in 2016 with the introduction of Kizuna AI. Her channel consisted of personality-focused videos where she would speak to the camera, or audience in this case, and discuss things. Among her content was, of course, Let's Plays where she would play games with her model in the corner reacting to the game in real time. What I find most striking about Kizuna is that despite being clearly portrayed by an actor, unlike Miku, her company still chooses to portray her as an AI like Miku, despite the fact that nothing about her is driven by artificial intelligence. Corp was founded in the same year by a man named Motoaki Tanigo, though fans refer to him as Iago. He had previously worked with the company Sanrio, the creators of Hello Kitty, to assist in creating video game characters for them, before starting Cover. Cover is a tech company which specializes in augmented reality and virtual reality software. Hololive didn't start out as a live streaming group actually, or even an entertainment group. The name is derived from Cover's first app, titled Hololive. This app was released for iPhones in March of 2017. This app featured the character Tokina Sora, who is now known as the first Hololive idol. In the app, Sora would appear in an AR setting where the game would use your phone's camera and display Sora's model as if she were really there. From there, you could adjust her pose and watch a live performance by her, although the wording is vague as to what that means. Cover later updated the app, completely stripping the AR features, but instead replaced it with a program where users could have their facial movements animated onto a character. Beyond the intrinsic fun to be had, this was also the means for Cover to hold auditions for members that would become the first generation of their idol group, also named Hololive. Afterwards, they would make their full transition onto YouTube and begin live streaming to the platform. After reaching success with the Japanese market, Cover aimed their sights at China and secured a deal with the video sharing website Bilibili to have their content hosted on the platform, as they would simultaneously stream to both YouTube and Bilibili. I don't think Westerners quite understand how big of a market China is, especially for anime. China is such a highly sought after market for most companies that it would mean potentially doubling your profits. So most companies try to play well with the country and its government, no matter how oppressive. From September 2019 to January 2020, the first generation of Chinese Hololive idols would also make their debut on Bilibili. VTubing mostly remained isolated to those countries due to the language barrier, making it hard for speakers of other languages to understand any of the content, although subtitles would be created for certain moments by fans. However, the one factor that is often attributed to Hololive's popularity now as a global brand is with one idol in particular, Kiryu Coco. Thanks to her bilingualism, she was able to create moments in her streams that could be enjoyed by English-speaking viewers as well. Her personality and general speech is also cited as being a big reason why she helped to break Hololive into the West, with clips of her streams being shared across anime communities online. A lot of people cite her as their first introduction to Hololive, and thanks to the growing interest of Hololive in the West, it convinced the agency to invest in the market and hold an audition for the first generation of English Hololive VTubers. These new VTubers would debut in September of 2020 to immediate success. In only the matter of a month, Gargura would hit over 1 million subscribers and would become the de facto most popular idol of the English group. In fact, I'm willing to bet you've probably seen her by now, before even watching this video, because she's pretty much inescapable. And with that, Hololive was increasing its popularity rapidly, and their conquest for world domination was progressing swimmingly. But that wouldn't remain for long. In September of 2020, in a collaborative livestream between Kiryu Coco and Akai Hato, the two were sifting through their channel analytics when they mentioned the country of Taiwan. As on Japanese YouTube, it's considered a country separate from China in the analytics. Now, while the original livestream is hard to come by, I've prepared a dramatic reenactment. Enjoy!
台湾
This acknowledgement of Taiwan as a separate nation angered the Chinese bootlickers in mainland China, sparking major outrage in the section of Hololive's fanbase. In response, these fans flooded Coco and Hato's social medias and livestream chats with harassment for this. Immediately, this put the parent company, Cover, between a rock and a hard place, and there really wasn't any solution where the company would come out unscathed. In the end, they basically threw the two under the bus and laid blame on them for, quote-unquote, divulging confidential analytics, and reaffirming their belief in the One China policy. Man, it's such a good look for a Japanese company to support the One China policy, don't you think? With this statement, they also suspended both the idols for 3 weeks. Despite this damage control, however, Cover's relationship with the Chinese populace in Bilibili would not improve, and after protests on Bilibili, Cover dissolved the entirety of their Chinese branch. What I find intriguing with this situation is just how cruel it feels. Despite being the idol to earn the most in super chats during the previous month, Cover brown-nosed China and basically directed everyone's hate to Coco and Hato for their honest mistake. And ironically, their damage control did nothing to help their standing with the Chinese audience, as they now have a limited presence in the country now. However, this wouldn't be the last event concerning Coco. On June 9th, 2021, Kiryu Coco announced that she would be graduating the following month. The term graduating originating from Japanese idols and means that the idol will unaffiliate themselves with their current group. This technically doesn't mean the same as retirement, as they can still resume working in the same industry, but won't be a part of the group they were once affiliated with. Although if you find the use of the term graduate to be incredibly confusing, I'm right there with you. This shocked the community as viewers had grown attached to her, and she got most of them into Hololive. Most cite her as being the most important idol in Hololive's history so far, and was instrumental in the creation of Hololive English. However, I believe we can glean a lot from this event in order to dive deep into how people perceive VTubers, their attachment to them, and what we can infer about Hololive as a company. For starters, the circumstances surrounding their sudden announcement are shrouded in mystery. The exact reasoning for her graduation has never been specifically stated, unlike their other idols. Other idols have either gone on record to state their reason, or it can be easily inferred what that reason is. At best, we can make an educated guess on what the reason could be by referencing things Coco has said in streams. From my understanding, Coco left mostly due to reasons relating to mental health. She stated in a stream that she often compared herself to other members and realized how much of a toxic, self-destructive thing that was to do. Another theory is that she simply couldn't continue with the state her channel was in, and still is in. Due to the Chinese bootlickers flooding her chats with harassment, Hololive had her adopt a members-only chat, where only channel members could comment on the live streams. This wasn't too bad as the chat still remained quite active, but it's clear by the way she speaks that she wasn't happy operating under such conditions. As for the fan reaction, I think it highlights what I've been building up over the course of this video. A lot, and I mean a lot of fans were distraught at the announcement. Far and wide, you could see fans lamenting over the imminent graduation. Now, I think it's perfectly fine for people, including men, to express their emotions publicly, but looking at this particular situation after doing all this research into the emotional manipulation that idols use, I see it in a different way. Now, I'm not comparing the fan reaction to that of the North Koreans when Kim Jong-il passed, but in some cases, it comes a bit close. I'll go more in depth on this point later, but having such an attachment to a creator online that the idea of them stopping their channels being so upsetting that even pondering the idea would make you feel like shit, then I want you to take a step back, evaluate why you're experiencing these feelings, and rationalize them and rethink their importance. Undeniably, what we can all take away from Coco's graduation is that idols, especially those affiliated with Hololive, have very little permanence. Coco graduated only a couple years, and a chunk of Holostars have also graduated as well. If this trend continues, the current members of Hololive probably won't last long enough to have their 5-year anniversary. Persona is the concept of how someone chooses to portray themselves among other people. It comes from Carl Jung and Jungian's psychology. To some extent, everyone has a persona, though how much of a persona one adopts differs from person to person. For instance, in public you probably have different thoughts running through your head, but most you don't verbally express. Most people choose to adhere to unspoken social expectations for how people should act in public and what is polite. That's persona, the filter of one's speech and actions in order to align with a certain image. Persona is a big part of Japanese idols, as their managers literally control everything they say and do, in order to fall in line with whatever persona they have assigned to them. With VTubers, this is only further amplified, as both the creator and/or parent company can control each aspect of the character, such as their personality, design, actions, and even their voice, if you know what to do. This amount of choice can be great for some, as it allows creators to craft their own character to represent them, even if I think most don't put a ton of care or effort into it. However, we run into a tricky situation as a result. Carl Jung has warned about the use of persona, as extreme use of a persona can result in people losing their real selves to become the persona they created for themselves. This is often seen with celebrities, as most people see them as the roles they portray. For people who grew up in the 1980s, it's hard for people to see Bill Cosby for who he truly is after knowing him as the comedic Cliff Huxtable from The Cosby Show. Similarly, it can be hard to tell the difference between the selves that internet personalities play from their true selves at times. It's what's become most devastating when people get called out for such unscrupulous shit, because looking at them from the outside, it's hard to see them doing such a thing. Similarly, but much less extreme of course, it can be hard to see VTubers in a manner that comes in conflict with their persona. An aspect a lot of people like in their online content creators in general is them being genuine. We've become used to the idea that the people we watch are acting like their true selves because it really feels like we're seeing them in their content, which is one of the reasons I like YouTube content so much more than TV shows. But it's always important that you remember that anyone you watch online could be different than how they act. I asked someone what they would think if a VTuber turned out to act differently or misbehaved when not streaming, and they stated, quote, "It'd probably ruin it for me. I like their demeanor and attitude first and foremost." Another VTuber fan I interviewed for the purposes of this video went on record to state that they actively avoid knowledge of what the real identities of VTubers look like, as it would ruin the illusion the character creates. In fact, such a thing happened in the case of a VTuber named Hitomi Chris. She auditioned to become a Generation 2 VTuber, and asked a dude that she may or may not have been romantically involved with to buy her all sorts of expensive equipment needed for her to audition and become a VTuber. After auditioning, she blocked this guy and told him that she would call the police if he tried to contact her. The dude spoke out on his blog and exposed this whole story online, although did reveal her personal information, with Chris threatening legal action as a result. And with this situation coming to light, Hitomi Chris was fired from Hololive and the contract with her and her artist were terminated. At the end of the day, no matter what cutesy persona each Hololive idol portrays, do we really know the people behind these characters? With how rapidly VTubing is growing, this issue is only going to get bigger and bigger as more and more VTubers will be caught doing something that interferes with their public persona. Due to the use of a persona, it's incredibly easy for bad actors to adopt the persona of a VTuber in order to rebrand and go undercover. Hopeless Lucille is a known groomer who was exposed on YouTube by their victim, Streamline Workshop. After being exposed for the horrible things they did, they ditched their previous branding before reappearing, trying to become a VTuber themselves. Thankfully, they were found out and exposed, but this will be an issue to plague the VTuber community going forward. Admittedly, it's an issue that will plague content creation platforms, that we have to weed out all the bad ones and make sure they don't try to rebrand and start over to continue their misdeeds. But the VTuber community will have it harder since it's easier to rebrand as a VTuber than something else. In that sense, you have my condolences. Over time, more and more, I keep seeing troubling behavior arise in communities surrounding online content creators and just people in general. Recently, we've been seeing a rise in parasocial relationships that fans are having with the creators they idolize. We already mentioned how it's a core part of Japanese idols, but it's also a part of K-pop, and we continue to see it with the Minecraft stan community and now live streamers. Now that you have the ability to get the attention of someone you watch and have them respond directly to you, it gives you that gratifying feeling, and trust me, I've felt it before too. That moment when you send a message and they respond and you just get that little rush, it's just...
Ryan Rev, donated $5. Have you heard of...
It's nice, it feels nice, it makes my day. But with how some of them operate, it's clear that they're taking cues from Japanese idols and how they manage their social media presence and conduct themselves. This can easily be seen with their Valentine's Day streams. A fan of VTubers that I interviewed stated this, quote, "Amelia Watson, for instance, did both a Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day stream, sacrificing part of her holiday both times just to make sure people in her audience didn't feel lonely. They, or at least the ones I watch, come off as people who know how hard life can be and how much people struggle, and try to do everything they can to smile and entertain those even when they're struggling themselves." End quote. Iago modeled a lot of Hololive based on the Japanese idol scene, so it's likely this aspect came from that, as that type of thing feels straight out of there. A big part of idol culture is merchandising. Concert tickets are only a fraction of an agency's profits, because if they can slap the likeness of their talent onto something, they will, and they will sell it for a markup to their fan base. Hololive similarly does this, and while merch in and of itself isn't an issue, the type of some of the merch plays into the parasocial and/or synthetic relationships fans have with their idols. Hololive is also soon launching an app called Hololive, which allows VTuber fans to have the models of their favorite VTubers appear on their phone in an AR setting, which holds a frightening resemblance to that of Love Plus. But that's nothing compared to the offerings from the website Cuddly Octopus. The website is known for selling dakimakura of anime characters, but they have web pages on their site dedicated to listing all of the VTuber dakimakura covers that they sell. And yes, they do sell explicit covers. These covers aren't fan-made, but are instead officially licensed and endorsed by the VTubers themselves. Reminder that dakimakura serve as a means for anime fans to live out their fantasy of sleeping with their anime waifus. This is actively cashing in on the fans that hold a parasocial relationship with them and feeding their unhealthy habit in order to make a profit. It's also emblematic of the difference in Western independent VTubers compared to those affiliated with Hololive. While they maintain more freedoms, they oddly embrace the sexually charged aspect of not only their fan base but also anime in general. A lot of VTubers in the West will often use their social media platforms to make posts that directly place their audience at the center of attention. They post a selfie and ask, "What do you think about this? How does this make you feel? Do you like how I did this for you?" When you put your fanbase in this situation where you're directly showing off for them, it either feeds into their parasocial relationship or it creates it. A good parallel for this would be the website OnlyFans, where women will post explicit content but will often employ the same rhetoric to establish a parasocial relationship with their fans so that they feel obligated or incentivized to rebill. Sex is inherently a very personal and intimate activity, and with more and more VTubers deliberately using sexual themes to either get their people interested in their brand or to sell more products, it shows a trend that the weakness within their fans is being exploited. To look at the facts, Hololive idols receive the highest amount of money in super chats on the entirety of YouTube, and despite there being YouTubers of similar subscriber counts, or even more in some cases, they still earn the highest on the entire platform. It's hard to imagine why this would occur given the wealth of talent here on YouTube, aside from what I've discussed. Of course, while it feels like you're giving money directly to the Hololive streamers, it's easy to forget that a company also takes a cut of each donation as well. The fans of VTubers are, a mixed bag, much like anime itself really. There's perfectly rational fans, some fans take it too seriously, and then there's,
Hey, Iron Mouse, you probably don't know me.
You know other fans. Online content creators cannot survive without the support of their fans. However, they can also inadvertently act on behalf of the creator and distort the image of the creator through their actions. An example of this would be the YouTuber Dream. No wait. Bad example. A good example of this could be seen with Leafy's fanbase back in 2016. Back then, the people who watched them took it upon themselves to do things such as spam hiss in the comments and chat of every video and stream at the time. It was pretty cool, but a lot of YouTubers and viewers weren't happy about this and made them dislike Leafy because of it. Similarly, the fans of VTubers have acted in a way that clouds the VTubers in this miasma that really paints a picture of the type of people who consume this content. Firstly, when Mori Kaliup was streaming, she needed to use the restroom during stream and put the stream in timeout, but didn't mute her mic. A very DSP move, of course. You could sorta hear her using the bathroom during the stream, but most of it was drowned out by the music placed. However, the madman over at 4chan manipulated the audio so you could hear her audibly fart.
High quality shit there, man.
There was another instance where Kureji Ollie made the same mistake, and you could hear her piss during the live stream.
Damn, boy, were you just frying chicken in there?
And I'm pretty sure that happened twice too, so that's... Okay, but enough jokes, let's get back to business. The biggest blunders that fans have committed was with the case of Mano Aloe. She was meant to be part of the 5th generation of idols, but she accidentally publicized a test stream where she tested her equipment, inadvertently leaking the design of her model. This technically breached her contract, and she had a 2-week suspension. During the suspension, fans of Hololive decided it would be a good idea to harass and dox this girl. Why did they do this? I have no fucking clue. I don't see how anyone thought this would accomplish anything. It's not even like it was that bad of an infraction to begin with, and she was let off pretty easily for an innocent mistake. But corporate simps be damned, I guess. As a result, she decided to back out of Hololive and graduate soon after debuting. This case just confuses me, because the motivation behind this harassment seems to come from basically nowhere. Also, for clarification, this pertains to the Japanese portion of the fanbase, so if you're watching this, you likely either had no idea about this or have no connection to it. But English fans aren't out of the woods yet. Almost a year back, right when the VTubing community was starting to expand westward with the introduction of Hololive EN, popular Twitch streamer Pokimane streamed herself using a 3D anime model in the same way many VTubers do. This generally upset the VTubing community and divided the community on the issue. Western independent VTubers supported Pokimane using a VTuber, while many fans were greatly opposed to this. Now, while I don't like gatekeeping, I can personally sympathize with these fans who felt scorned by this. When someone with a massive following brings attention to something niche, it tends to cause a bunch of their fans to flood into the pre-existing community, except they have little understanding of what makes the thing the community is centered around so great. It's something I take to heart, since I've seen this effect happen with one of my favorite games of all time, Persona 5. I became a fan of the game and series at the time when it got too big. You had people interested in the game more because it was an anime game with cute girls, rather than for the deep themes in the game's story, or even the gameplay itself. And that's why people stereotype Persona fans as being lonely virgins and pedos now. Not to mention that a lot of VTuber fans already didn't like Pokimane all too much, which definitely isn't helped with her numerous fuck-ups online. You've probably already heard of some of these, like the situation with Fainted, It's a Gundam, copyright striking a Black's video, etc. Let's just say that Pokimane definitely isn't the hill most VTubers are willing to die on.
Oh, is this a video where some random dude behind a VR machine calls a girl a thought for 20 minutes? Really want to put my logo on that one!
Hate the delivery of that line.
If the VTuber community is supposed to be so opposed to gatekeeping, then should they allow Hopeless Lucille into the community? After all, who's to say how much she cares about the community, especially compared to Pokimane? If it takes someone being a groomer for you to not want them associated in your community, then I think you have a really low standard for someone you don't want to associate with. VTubing has its origin in idol and anime culture, so to have someone who isn't affiliated with either to try it out, it cheapens the feel of its novelty. Seeing as how Pokimane didn't really put as much thought or effort into the creation of her model, and just kind of made a model that's literally just her, without any of the flashy idol persona present and Hololive and such, it comes off as a cheap cash grab. And seeing as how the auditions for the first round of Hololive English was back in May of 2020, I can see how people came to that conclusion. If you treat Pokimane the same as a well-established VTuber, then at that point, why not just treat a cheaper Chinese knockoff anime figure the same as the official figure? After all, if they look the same and function just about the same, then who cares about the company that made it? A few Western VTubers have made videos basically shaming fans for their opinions and feelings on the discourse, and I definitely don't buy their reasons. A VTuber by the name of Serotina made a video about the topic, but to say she's biased would be the understatement of the fucking century. Another VTuber, Yuki Buns, made a video on the same topic, with it being the most popular video on their channel. Another popular video she made was also a video on Yandere Dev, and discussing all the scummy actions that he's done in the past. So Yuki Buns, if you're watching this, which you probably are because for some reason, if someone's name is mentioned in a YouTube video, they always watch it somehow. They always seem to find it. Would you accept Yandere Dev into the VTuber community after everything you've discussed? I know you might say yes, but deep down, I know you wouldn't.
I can make my boobies grow and shrink.
If you've been paying attention, which I hope you have, there's a test on this next week, I've been referring to VTubers affiliated with Hololive as idols. This is for two reasons. One, it's easier and quicker to say that than VTuber every single time, and also, the more research I do into the history and nature of Hololive as a company and the talent agency, the more and more you begin to see the similarities between Hololive and something like AKB48. Now, they aren't on the same scale, of course, but it's easy to see the inspiration. Yako aimed to create a virtual idol group, and naturally drew inspiration from real idol groups and virtual idols, such as Miku and Kizuna AI. From Hololive's inception, it was created to take the pre-established idol formula, but allowed the appeal that anime has. Not to mention that both the industries have lended themselves incredibly well to merchandising and marketing. More and more, we're going to be seeing the faces of these idols as time passes. Originally, I wanted to make a section in this video where I highlighted the striking similarities between VTubers and Japanese idols, but after doing all this research, I don't have to, because they just are idols. They're marketed as idols, their agency is set up nearly identically to idol agencies, they're merchandised the same way, and they have live performances just the same. The differences between AKB48 and Hololive get less and less recognizable as time passes, and soon they may just go toe-to-toe. What puzzles me is how accepting everyone is of a company just rising the ranks of the YouTube platform, and just accept them to the point of almost treating the company as warmly as the talents themselves. I've seen a lot of people treat the company's CEO like a real upstanding guy, and just like one of them too. That's cool, I too idolize millionaire CEOs. But don't forget that he's the CEO. His goal is not to do what the fans want, or what would be best for the fans, but will maintain the highest profit margins for the company. It's also worth mentioning that Hololive will always hold the rights and intellectual property to every idol under their brand, so that's good. Surprising that not too long ago we were complaining about T-Series and how elite celebrities and brands were beginning to ruin YouTube as a platform, but if they have cute anime girls, suddenly it's okay. Really makes me wonder where the U in YouTube has gone. Let me ask you something. What do anime, idols, VTubers, live streaming, video games, and YouTube content all have in common? Escapism. They are all forms of escapism that many people choose to enjoy to get their minds off of regular life. Let's face it, life fucking sucks. Despite living in the most technologically advanced time on Earth thus far, it's undeniable that so many people are unhappy. In the past, people speculated how technology could make our lives easier and assumed that we would be happy as a result. It's only when we arrived at that future that we realized that technology doesn't make us happy. It just makes us feel more isolated than ever. Earlier in this video, I discussed the loneliness that is plaguing Japan, but the truth is that loneliness is starting to creep up in just about every country. Birth rates get lower every year. Less people are getting married, and it definitely feels like a lot more people are concerned with being sad that they can't get a date instead of just trying. More and more people are finding themselves totally isolated from other people, and I'm guessing there's at least a sizable subset of you who fall into this category. And if you do, just know that you aren't alone. Shit, I've been there myself. But I just want you to know that you don't have to drown yourself in media to try and fill that hole in your heart. Because no matter what you do, you'll come to find that nothing will ever fill that void. Whether it's watching VTubers or watching live streams, playing dating sims, whatever. These are only temporary fixes for a challenge you must overcome. Sure, it feels good in the moment, but soon you'll realize it's just hollow. I wanted to make this video because I saw how the progression from Japanese idols have led to where we are now today, and given the trend we are seeing, more and more companies will come along to manufacture and mass produce the imitation of human compassion without any of the soul. A big contributing factor to what motivated me to make this in the first place was a video by Gaijin Goomba. Okay, he is the Goomba Got Back guy, but his story with how he sank into a depression after he broke up with his girlfriend really spoke to me. Him feeling like he was worthless and that no one would ever love him again. It was only when he reached rock bottom did he cave in and bought into the idea of a synthetic relationship. He was able to climb out of it, but his story was impactful to me nonetheless. Mostly because I could see how anyone could get to that point.
I'm in awe because it has visually summed up what the withdrawn otaku lifestyle does to a person. It destroys relationships with people, it crushes your reality, and it controls you. You become enslaved by what's been fabricated to suit your raw emotional and physical demands. For months after that, I was an emotional wreck. I didn't have many friends in Japan, and I was oftentimes alone in my apartment after work. My heart was crushed. I didn't know how to deal well with a Japanese society that expected me to hide my emotion and pain from my colleagues. So I fell into fantasy to try and cover up the loneliness and agony, and it took over my life. As soon as I got home from work, I got on the computer and rarely got off it. I got sucked into the lifestyle of falsities, moe, and synthetic relationships. And not only that, but I fell into it in the country where the whole damn lifestyle originated. It was an absolutely terrible way to live. I missed so many chances on so many things that I will never get back. And it was only until Aki and I began talking when the light began to shine back in my life. She pulled me through one of the loneliest of times and made me feel loved again, like I was worth something. If you can't already tell, I hate moe. I hate the J-pop industry, and this is why. It manipulates you. It makes you believe that you're loved by something that isn't really there. Whether that's one of the girls of AKB48 or a purely synthetic idol like Miku, I just can't stand it. I watch guys suffering from hikikomori lifestyles that just piss away opportunity after opportunity in favor of this dribble of lies. I just hate it so.
Another YouTuber by the name of Fither also made a video compiling all the thoughts of Kiryu Koko's fans before her graduation and recounting their experiences with her and helping them during their low points in their lives. And while I'm happy that people can find so much joy in watching someone that it helps them forget about their problems, I just hope for your sake you don't get too attached. If I can be honest for a moment, I'm unsure how this video will be received. I know I've made some points that not everyone will agree with, but with the video's overarching theme of VTubers manipulating their audience, I could easily see this getting a huge amount of dislikes, just like how every other one of my videos do. But, honestly, I'm past the point of caring. If what I've said resonates with even one person, I'd consider it a success. And if there's something I want to leave you with, it's this. Despite how negative this video has been, I don't want to take away what you enjoy. This video isn't trying to tell you to stop watching VTubers. I'm also not here to insult you or call you names for watching VTubers or anime or anything else, because that's a toxic behavior that anime fans have had to deal with since the beginning, and ultimately doesn't help them understand the psychological nuances at play. You don't have to stop watching VTubers or anime or Japanese idols or anything, but I hope that I gave you a new perspective on this. And I hope that if you are relying on it to quell your loneliness, well, maybe reach out to someone and try and connect with someone. Whether it's a coworker, classmate, neighbor, family member, even someone online if need be. If you're looking for someone to form a true connection with, there's no time like the present. I know it can be hard. It's frightening. But I know you can do it.